Hey, this is Evan Marquez, dating coach for smart, strong, successful women, your personal trainer for love. Welcome back to the Love You podcast. I am your host, Evan Marquez. I'm excited to be here, getting into the swing of content for the month of December. Uh, Sensitive time. A lot of people have things on their minds. I've talked in previous episodes about just sort of the ambient anxiety about the world and the pessimism and what I hope you get from this podcast is that there's always reason to be optimistic when it comes to love. There are things that you can't control. You can't control what's going on in the news. You can't control what's going on in other countries. You can't control climate change, but you can absolutely control how you think about love, how you think about yourself, how you think about men, and how you approach dating and relationships. And hopefully that's what you get out of listening to this podcast. Thank you again for all your kind reviews. In advance, if you haven't given a review yet, it's mandatory. You're not allowed to listen to this podcast without going to Apple or Spotify or YouTube and saying something, preferably nice. So I'm just letting you know it is the cost of doing business here. Don't ask for money. I do want you to say nice things about me publicly. So today's episode, is he really ghosting you? That is the title. Is he really ghosting you? And it sounds like it wouldn't have much nuance to it. And yet, I discovered in having a conversation with a client the other day, it actually has a lot of nuance. So let's just start off with definitions. Definitions matter. Like definitions determine how we see the world. Like language really matters. I know I'm a language nerd, but language really matters. So we could say the definition of ghosting is a guy who you're talking to who suddenly stops talking to you without explanation. That's the quickest, dirtiest, simplest explanation, and that would be true. But that would flatten ghosting and suggest that all ghosting, by that definition, is the same thing. So you're texting with a guy on Bumble and suddenly stops texting you. Were you ghosted? You have gone out with, you've not even gone out with, you've been talking to a guy on the phone, but you never met. You went on a date and he didn't ask you out for a second date without explanation. These are all things where people use the word ghosted, and I'm not positive that it meets the definition. To me, ghosting is there's something there. Like you've maybe you've slept together. Maybe I like to do that after the relationship, but either he's your boyfriend or you slept together, or there's something there, right? Where there's been enough time, emotional investment, physical activity, where you can say the stakes are higher than he's a rando on the internet, right? So, yes, technically it's ghosting anytime someone stops talking to you without explanation, but it's important because I got a client who's telling me, she may be listening to this podcast, and so I'm just repeating the conversation I had with her. She was telling me how she got ghosted by a guy, and it turns out it's a guy she hadn't met yet. It was a guy she was talking to. And I don't want to defend the ghosts entirely. And I don't want to deny how it feels. I mean, it stings. Rejection in any form stings. But I think it stings more and should sting more when the rejection is theoretically, and technically, you never want to take anything personal, but when it's theoretically more personal, right? There's a big difference between a guy who dated you for 6 months and realized you're not his future wife, right? Than a guy who swiped left on you on a dating site. And it's just qualitative difference. So I like to work off of Love You definitions here. For those of you who don't know, Love You is my signature course. I've been teaching it for almost 10 years now. It's impacted 13,000 women. And I believe in my own bullshit. I don't think there's any other way to say that. I really, really believe in this because we have a really good track record of helping out women. And so one of the Love You sayings that I often trot out is, no man is real until he's your boyfriend. He's just hope, fantasy, projection, and potential. Got that? Hope, fantasy, projection, and potential until he's your boyfriend. And in Love You, we generally don't want a guy to be our boyfriend in any sooner than 4 weeks because you don't know enough about him. So the question is, why get too bent out of shape over someone who is not your boyfriend? Well, there's studies. I mean, there's scientific studies that show the physical effects of someone when uh, whether it's a boyfriend or a friend stops. If you ever had a friend break up, really, really painful when someone that you know and care about stops talking to you. I think to me, the important distinction here is how well you know someone to consider it a ghosting and to allow it to affect you emotionally. Um, and whether there's a universe in which we could sort of understand things as they are. I've been listening to Michael Singer, who did the Untethered Soul, the Surrender Experiment. It's spirituality for people like me who aren't spiritual, I guess. And he's just a big advocate of accepting the world as it is, um, because we can't change it. The more we can accept it and work within the world, however bad the circumstances, our reaction to reality is going to determine a lot of how we feel about reality. So in reality, if you're on a dating app, um, and you are swiping left and right on a bunch of people and texting a whole bunch of people, reality dictates that everybody has a limited amount of time, everybody has a limited amount of attention, right? Limited amount of bandwidth, a limited number of nights to potentially talk on the phone or go out. And so if everybody has infinite choice on a dating app, and it's the nature of dating apps is that we have infinite choice and it takes a small investment, literally a thumb swipe to make that initial investment, it's not terribly surprising that a lot of things don't get off the ground or go sideways. So imagine, if you will, a guy where, I don't know, how should I say this? Like, I want to flip it around. I want to do this both ways because I think we have unrealistic expectations about how people should treat us online because we focus on the should. Here's what he should do for me. If I, in the case of my client, if she was talking to a guy on the phone for, she talked to him 3 or 4 times or something like that. I'm making that up. I don't know the actual facts. But if she spoke to him 3 or 4 times without going out, and then he didn't call her anymore, and she got hurt because she thought it was the beginning of a relationship, there's an argument to be made that he should have said something to her. I'm no longer going to be calling you, right? But if you flip that around and you consider all the men that you've ever talked to online, did you tell all of them, whether in texting phase or in phone call phase or directly after the first date? Because in my experience, and I would assume it's gotten worse since I stopped dating, when I would go out with a woman and she didn't want to go out with me, she rarely would say, I don't want to go out with you. Thank you. I mean, the proper, right? Thank you so much for taking me out, Evan. It was really nice meeting you. I didn't feel the connection necessary to take things to the next level. You seem like a good guy. I wish you the best of luck in your search. I tell my clients to write that email. I think it's a classy thing. But I also know most people don't do that. Usually when a woman goes out with a guy and she doesn't want to see him again, she just doesn't respond to him. Is that ghosting? Or is it just when he doesn't call you when you're expecting him to call you? So that's why I kind of like hold this up to the light and have to challenge, well, what really is the definition of ghosting? Is it every time two people, don't get together, don't get don't get married and don't announce the end of their correspondence? Is that ghosting? Or do we need to soften the definition of it so it doesn't feel so cruel and capricious and instead it's kind of normal? If you're talking to 10 guys, I don't expect you to write to all of them every time you decide not to see them again. The only people who may be owed an explanation are and again, I think it's classy to write something after a first date if you have no intention in seeing him again instead of not responding to him. But I also understand if you choose not to, and guys have to understand if you choose not to. Okay, I took her out for dinner, spent $100, texted her, silence. All right, I guess I better take a hint. Rather, there's the world as we want it to be, and then there's the world as it is. And so this leaves me with an idea that I've thrown around on this podcast before about everybody is someone's second choice. And that doesn't sit well with everybody, especially women in my experience, listening to women who very much, and I understand why, want to be cherished, want to be adored, want to be put up on a pedestal. Um, and again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. Uh, at the same time, and there is always an at the same time, there's a very realistic scenario because I've been through it before and I've been on both sides of this equation where let's say I started talking to you or texting you online. At the same time, prior to meeting you, I had gone on 2 or 3 dates with someone else. And on my last date with that other person, things got a little hot and heavy. And I decided I like her. I want to pursue this relationship single-mindedly and focus on her. And you're just someone that I had started talking to or texting, right? The right thing to do would be to let you know that, right? That would be plan A, to let you know, hey, I met someone else. I want to see where this goes. There's a decent chance it won't work out if my relationship history is any indication. But I wish you best of luck. You seem really great. If I come back in the future, I hope we'll have an opportunity to meet. That would be the ideal thing that a man would do or a woman would do in that situation. But most people don't act that way. You find someone that you like more, you drop everybody you're talking to like a hot potato, right? You go out with new person for 3 weeks. They look great on paper, turn out to be a nightmare in person. One month later, you're single again. So in my universe, a man or a woman can come back from that and go back to the original person to say, hey, I made the wrong choice. I screwed up. Would love to have the opportunity to rekindle things. And indeed, the go high version of that is okay. Not how dare you? I'm not your safety school. I'm no one's second choice. Letting ego get in the way of that is ridiculous because you're just cutting off your nose to spite your face. Everybody ends up with each other because someone else disappointed them or rejected them. So it kind of doesn't matter 20 years later if you're in a happy couple, if you he got rejected by another woman and came back to you. Because remember, he didn't know you. It's not like you were dating for 6 months. You were someone he was talking to on the internet for a couple of weeks. So it's not a rejection of you, right? That's the Don Miguel Ruiz 4 agreements. One of the 4 agreements, don't take things personally. I can't think of a more important thing for people who are dating or online dating than to understand that most of this is indeed not personal. So I've got a group of women that I coach. I threw out this idea the other day on our Tuesday night Love You Live group coaching calls. And it was some of the women found it really hard to wrap themselves around this, right? Because maybe it's human nature. Maybe I'm telling you to fight your human nature. But we always fight our human nature. You don't give in to your road rage. You don't call everybody every name in the book. If your boss does something bad, men don't, men for the most part don't sleep with everybody who walks because we're attracted to them. When we're in a monogamous relationship, we're constantly overriding our human nature. So I don't know if you if you were dating, one guy and you chose another guy over him because the new guy was a 10 and the other guy was a 7 and things bombed with the 10, I would hope you could go back to the 7 you were talking to and he wouldn't give you a hard time about it. I would hope you would see things in the same way, which means in turn, you should feel the exact same way if a guy does that with you. So the whole purpose of this conversation is to kind of redefine the definition of ghosting, in that ghosting is invariable. It's going to happen no matter what you do when you're on a dating site, because you don't get to police how everybody acts. Given the fact that's going to happen, how much weight are you going to give it over you and your self-esteem and your feeling about dating relationships, online dating and men, right? And if a guy disappears for a few weeks to pursue another woman and he comes back, does that mean he's a jerk, a player, bad news? No, it probably means he doesn't know you very well and he wants an opportunity to get to know you well. So challenging. Sometimes I got to do the challenging ones. It can't just be the men suck versions of this. Sometimes I have to, kind of poke and prod and see if any of these ideas work. I thank you for considering them. I thank you for listening. And I want to remind you, we're doing some good stuff here in the Love You community in the not so distant future. Hopefully by the end of the year, maybe January. Again, I know I'm being vague, but I'm being intentionally vague. What I want you to do is, if you haven't done this before, go to my website, right? We already talked about you giving me a nice review at the top of the podcast. We don't need to talk about that again. But if you're a listener, if you're one of the thousands of people every week who listen to this podcast with regularity and earnest interest, go to my website, go to evanmarkkatz.com, and take the quiz. We put a new quiz up, and the quiz tells you if you've been wasting time on the wrong men. My guess is that you indeed have been wasting time on the wrong men. I hate to give the secret away, but if you take this quiz, I think you'll discover you've spent most of your life wasting time on the wrong men, and I'm going to show you how to stop doing so. Because that's the biggest pain point most women have in dating. It's not where are the right guys. They're mixed in with the 10% of guys are mixed in with the 90% of guys you don't want to waste your time on. The key is learning to identify the time wasters more quickly. So that's what I'm going to do for you when you take my quiz and be on my mailing list. We'll be in better touch that way. And if you've been listening for long enough and you're thinking, this guy who likes to hear himself talk really does care about women. He really does get results. And I really don't want to just keep on listening to podcasts and being in free Facebook groups and wondering why my love life doesn't change. Your job is to go to evanmarkkatz.com/now. Book a time to talk with me. I'll be gentle. And really, the whole nature of the conversation, it's a discovery call to figure out if you're a good fit for coaching. If you are, you'll join Love You and you'll be part of my community, and we'll get to talk every single week, and you'll be part of a community of other women who are grappling with these same issues and learning to raise their standards and operate from a place of confidence and abundance in love. That is my favorite part of my job. It's not that I don't like the podcasts. I do actually like the podcasts, but I really, really like working with people and seeing tangible results. So thanks for listening. Thanks for listening to the Love You podcast. Thanks for telling your friends, and I'll see you again next week. Bye-bye.